In 1939, a self-taught Harlem historian named John G. Jackson published a small and explosive essay. Its title was Ethiopia and the Origin of Civilization, and its subtitle promised a critical review of the evidence of archaeology, anthropology, history, and comparative religion according to the most reliable sources and authorities. In a few thousand words, Jackson set out to overturn the most cherished assumption of Western history, that civilization is the gift of the white race. His answer, drawn entirely from standard scholarly works, was that the foundations of culture were laid by a dark-skinned people whom the ancients called the Ethiopians. Jackson's thesis is bold and simple. For the first 2,000 or 3,000 years of civilization, he argues, there was not a single civilized white man on the earth. The arts, the sciences, the first cities, writing, religion, and the mapping of the stars were all founded by the swarthy peoples of Africa and Asia, whom classical writers grouped under one name, Ethiopians. Marshalling Herodotus, Volney, the Rawlinsons, Boaz, and dozens of authorities, Jackson contends that ancient Ethiopia stretched from the Atlantic to India, and that its black founders seeded civilization across the whole of the Old World, and perhaps the New as well. This is his case, built witness by witness. Before he can rebuild the past, Jackson must first clear away the prejudice that buried it, beginning with the historians themselves. Jackson opens with an indictment of H.G. Wells, whose popular Outline of History, he says, beat with a Nordic heart in nearly every chapter. Wells noted, on the authority of Sir Flinders Petrie, an early connection between Colchis and prehistoric Egypt, and mentioned that Herodotus had remarked on resemblances between the Colchians and the Egyptians, but Wells carefully declined to quote what Herodotus actually wrote. In Book 2 of his history, the Greek traveler had declared the Colchians to be a colony of Egyptians, because, like them, they have black skins and frizzled hair. Having already labeled Egypt and Babylonia a triple system of white man civilizations, Jackson notes, Wells could hardly afford to quote that inconvenient line. The omission, he insists, was no accident, but a quiet act of censorship, the kind that lets a flattering theory survive only by hiding the evidence against it. The distortion, Jackson argues, runs through nearly every textbook of ancient history. They open by telling us there are 3, 4, or 5 races of man, but that only one of them, the white race, and especially its Nordic or Aryan branch, was ever responsible for civilization, culture, and progress. The reason is plain enough. The writers are, as a rule, Nordics themselves, or believe themselves to be. Yet prejudice alone does not account for it. There is genuine confusion among scholars about how to classify races at all, and biased writers exploit that confusion to prop up their preconceptions. Before going any further, Jackson insists, we must settle the question of race itself on rational grounds, for a history built on a false racial premise can only produce a false picture of the human past. The error, he warns, is not merely careless, it is systematic, repeated in book after book until it hardens into accepted fact. To show how unstable the science really was, Jackson runs through its history. Linnaeus, in the 18th century, listed 4 races by continent: European, African, Asiatic, and American. Blumenbach added a 5th, the brown or oceanic type. In 1800, the Frenchman Cuvier traced all peoples to Ham, Shem, and Japhet, the 3 sons of Noah. After that, classification became a contest. By 1873, Hegel had found 12 distinct races, then annexed 22 more, for a grand total of 34. Denneker, in 1900, proposed 6 grand divisions, 17 subdivisions, and 29 races. And after all this industry, Jackson observes, there was still no agreement at all. Where one anthropologist found 3 types, another spotted 33 without the least difficulty. A science so divided against itself, Jackson implies, was in no position to pronounce one race the sole author of civilization, yet that is exactly the verdict its practitioners kept handing down. Yet, on one point, Jackson notes, the classifiers were unanimous, that the white peoples were superior to all the darker races. Modern science was already dissolving that fallacy. Schopenhauer had remarked that there is no such thing as a white race, much as it is talked of, but that every white man is merely a faded or bleached one. Joseph McCabe held that man was at first very dark of skin, woolly-haired and flat-nosed, diverging only as he wandered into colder climates. Franz Boas, the dean of American anthropologists, divided all humanity into just 2 stocks, the dark-skinned Indian Ocean or Negroid division, ringing Africa, South Asia, and Australia, and the lighter Pacific or Mongoloid division. The white race, on this view, was a late bleached offshoot. With prejudice set aside, Jackson turns to his real subject, the ancient Ethiopians, and the breadth of an empire most maps have forgotten. Who built the first civilizations? Jackson cites Professor Charles Senyobos, who wrote that the earliest civilized inhabitants of both the Nile and the Tigris-Euphrates valleys were a dark-skinned people with short hair and prominent lips, called Cushites or Ethiopians by some scholars, and Hamites by others. Out of this single Cushite culture, he argues, both Egypt and Mesopotamia grew, and it was not confined to the Near East. Dr. W.J. Perry called it the Archaic Civilization. Sir Grafton Elliott Smith named it the Heliolithic culture. Its traces, Jackson says, have been found across the entire globe, a vast and forgotten network of related peoples whose common origin lay among the dark-skinned races of Africa and Southern Asia. This, Jackson argues, is the buried root system from which the celebrated civilizations of the ancient world all sprang, however different their later branches came to look. Jackson follows Elliott Smith's reconstruction of this archaic culture, which Wells dated as far back as 15,000 years before Christ. Smith called it the Heliolithic, or sunstone culture, and identified a strange constellation of customs that traveled together wherever it spread. Circumcision, the kuvad, in which the father takes to his bed when a child is born, massage, the making of mummies, megalithic monuments like Stonehenge, the artificial deforming of infants' heads, tattooing, the religious pairing of the sun and the serpent, and the swastika used as a sign of good luck. Where one of these practices appeared, Smith found, most of the others appeared too, linking Brittany with Borneo and Peru, yet never taking root in the Nordic or Mongolian homelands. On one point, Jackson breaks sharply with Wells. Wells called this culture Neolithic, New Stone Age, but Jackson insists that is a mistake. These ancient peoples had long passed beyond stone, raising edifices that could only have been cut with hard metal tools. Iron, he writes, is the very backbone of civilization, and the Iron Age began very anciently in Africa. Citing the researches of Boas, Torde, and W.E.B. Du Bois, Jackson argues that the art of smelting iron was first developed in the interior of Africa, and that the knowledge of it then passed through Egypt to the rest of the world. The Smiths of Inner Africa, in this telling, armed the whole world with its most important metal, and a culture able to work iron was no Stone Age relic, but an advanced civilization in its own right. Modern maps shrink Ethiopia to Abyssinia, but Jackson restores its ancient size. Sir E. A. Wallace Budge wrote that classical geographers called the whole region from India to Egypt by the name of Ethiopia and counted all its dark-skinned peoples as Ethiopians. Homer and Herodotus, Budge noted, called the peoples of the Sudan, Egypt, Arabia, Palestine, Western Asia, and India alike Ethiopians. Strabo agreed that the Greeks had designated the entire southern world as Ethiopia. Ephorus said the Ethiopians occupied all the southern coasts of both Asia and Africa. And Stephanus of Byzantium declared that Ethiopia was the first established country on earth, that the Ethiopians were the first to worship the gods and the first to give laws. The vestiges, Jackson notes, reach from Nubia to the Americas. Jackson now builds his case region by region, beginning in the very cradle that the textbooks call the birthplace of the West, Mesopotamia. Jackson presses the point with a passage from Bishop William Montgomery Brown. For the first 2,000 or 3,000 years of civilization, Brown wrote, there was not a civilized white man on the earth. Civilization was founded and developed by the swarthy races of Mesopotamia, Syria, and Egypt, while the white race remained so barbaric that an Egyptian or Babylonian priest would have judged the riffraff of white tribes to the north hopelessly incapable of progress. It was the southern colored peoples in China, Central America, India, Mesopotamia, Syria, Egypt, and Crete who gave the northern whites their civilization. The Egyptologists who insisted the Egyptians came from Asia, Jackson adds, had no evidence at all. They simply could not believe an African people had built a great culture. For the Mesopotamian case, Jackson calls his strongest witness, Sir Henry Rawlinson, the father of Assyriology. In an essay on the early history of Babylonia, Rawlinson laid out 5 links binding it to Ethiopia. First, the Babylonian system of writing was nearly identical to Egypt's. Second, in the biblical genealogies, Cush and Mizraim, Ethiopia and Egypt are brothers, and from Cush sprang Nimrod of Babylon. Third, the vocabulary of the primitive Babylonians was undoubtedly Cushite, surviving purest in the Mara of southern Arabia and the Gala of Abyssinia. Fourth, all the traditions pointed to early ties between Ethiopia, southern Arabia, and the cities of the lower Euphrates. Fifth, the Greek legends of Cepheus and Memnon and the names Cush and Phut bound Africa to Chaldea. Beneath Babylon lay an older people still, the Sumerians, founders of the earliest Mesopotamian civilization. Jackson notes that the Assyrian and Babylonian inscriptions call them the Blackheads, or the black-faced people, and that their monuments show them beardless and with shaven heads, sharply distinct from the bearded, long-haired Semitic Babylonians who came after. Their own myths, moreover, said their culture had come originally from the south. From this evidence, Sir Henry Rawlinson concluded that the first civilized inhabitants of Sumer and Akkad were immigrants from the African Ethiopia, carrying their culture northward into the valley of the two rivers. The American Orientalist John D. Baldwin allowed they might instead have come from Arabia, which was also once called Ethiopia. Either way, Jackson stresses, the trail led back to a dark-skinned southern Cushite source. Not every scholar agreed on the homeland, and Jackson fairly airs the dispute. Dr. H.R. Hall of the British Museum argued that the Sumerians were Indian in type, that their strongly marked features most resembled the Dravidian race of India, and that they had passed by land through Persia to the valley of the two rivers, leaving the seeds of their culture in Elam along the way. Dr. W. J. Perry answered that the Sumerians' own origin stories told a very different tale, for from their beginnings they had been in touch with Egypt. Their early texts named Dilmun, Magan, and Meluha, and a late Assyrian inscription, Perry noted, identified Magan and Meluha as the archaic names for Egypt and Ethiopia. Whether India or Africa, the source was black. East of Babylon stretched Elam, reaching from the Tigris to the Zagros Mountains of Persia, with its famous capital at Susa, a city founded about 4,000 years before Christ that survived until Muslim invaders destroyed it around the year 650 of our era. The Elamites, Jackson reports, were judged Negroid in type by H.G. Wells and Sir Harry Johnston, who noted a strong Negroid strain persisting in the modern people of the region. Archaeology confirmed it. The English Egyptologist Reginald Poole described a portrait of an Elamite king on a vase unearthed at Susa, painted black, and therefore, Poole concluded, belonging to the Cushite race. The black thread, Jackson shows, ran through every empire of the ancient Near East. Civilization is more than cities and metal. Jackson now turns to the oldest of the sciences, astronomy, and asks who first read the sky. Folklore, Jackson argues, often preserves what history forgets, and the proof is overhead every night. Greek myth told of a great Ethiopian king, Cepheus, whose fame was so vast that he and his family were set among the stars. His wife was Queen Cassiopeia, his daughter, the Princess Andromeda. The constellations bearing their names, Cepheus, Cassiopeia, and Andromeda, are still called the royal family by astronomers. It may seem strange, Jackson admits, that legendary rulers of ancient Ethiopia should have their names graven on our star maps to this very day. But the strangeness, he suggests, is itself a clue, a faint memory of a time when the Ethiopians were the acknowledged masters of the heavens, honored in the very sky they had charted. Why should Ethiopians rule the constellations? Jackson answers with the ancients. A treatise attributed to Lucian declared that the Ethiopians were the first to invent the science of the stars and to give names to the planets, and that this art passed, still in an imperfect state, from them to the Egyptians. Count Volney, drawing on the meticulous researches of Charles Dupuy, pushed the origin of the Zodiac back to 15,000 years before Christ, giving the world's oldest picture book an antiquity of some 17,000 years. That date, Jackson notes, is not extravagant. The American astronomer Arthur Harding traced the Zodiac's beginnings to around 26,000 before Christ. The mapping of the heavens was the work of a black race on the Upper Nile, ages before recorded history began. Jackson lingers over Volney's famous passage on how the Zodiac was born among the farmers of the Nile. It was on the borders of the Upper Nile, Volney wrote, among a black race of men, that the worship of the stars was first organized, tied to the productions of the earth and the labors of agriculture. The Ethiopian of Thebes named the stars of inundation, Aquarius, for the season when the Nile began to overflow, the stars of the bull for the months when they began to plow, the stars of the lion for when that beast, driven from the desert by thirst, appeared on the riverbanks. And when a brilliant star rose to warn of the coming flood, like a watchdog giving notice of danger, he called it the dog, the barker, Sirius. From the stars, Jackson descends to the stones of Egypt itself, where the faces of the kings, he argues, give their own unbiased verdict. The bridge between Africa and the East, in Jackson's telling, is Memnon. The Ethiopians claimed him as their king. The Egyptians identified him with the pharaoh Amenhotep, whose colossal statue stands in the British Museum. In Homer's Iliad, Memnon leads an army of Elamites and Ethiopians out of Africa, through Egypt, to the aid of King Priam at Troy. Herodotus made him the founder of Susa, the Elamite capital, and Professor Rawlinson noted places called Memnonia in both Egypt and Susa, and a tribe of Memnones at Meroe. Memnon, Rawlinson concluded, unites the eastern with the western Ethiopians. The less we regard him as an historical person, the more he personifies the ethnic identity of the two races, African and Asian. In Memnon, legend and history fuse into a single dark-skinned figure striding from the Nile to the walls of Troy. What did the pharaohs actually look like? Jackson lets their monuments answer. Charles Darwin, in The Descent of Man, recorded that when he looked at the statue of Amenhotep III, he agreed with two competent judges that the king had a strongly marked Negro type of features. The features of Akhenaten, Amenhotep's successor, Jackson adds, are even more Negroid than those of his illustrious predecessor. And the English scholar Philip Smith wrote that the Greek eyewitnesses, who had no motive to deceive, described the Egyptians as dark, thick-lipped, and frizzly-haired, closely akin to the Negro race, while the fullness of the lips seen in the Sphinx and in the portraits of the kings is itself characteristic of the Negro. Against this evidence stood the era's most influential Egyptologists, and Jackson names them. James Breasted claimed the early civilized peoples of the Nile and Western Asia belonged to a great white race, a claim Jackson says flatly that is utterly false and supported by no facts whatsoever. Elliott Smith showed the same bias, insisting on a profound gap that separates the Negro from the rest of mankind, the Egyptian included. Jackson sets their prejudice beside the candor of Count Falmey and of Professor William Ripley of Harvard, both of whom had granted that the Egyptians were Negroid. The dignified Egyptian, Jackson concludes, was an African Ethiopian, a Nilotic Negro, a fact obvious to every unbiased student of Oriental history. The Great White Race, in the end, was not a discovery but an invention, conjured to keep the credit for civilization in European hands. Jackson's map keeps widening. The Ethiopian world, he argues, reached far beyond Africa, into India, into Europe, and across the Atlantic itself. India, Jackson argues, was Ethiopian before it was ever Aryan. Its earliest inhabitants, the Dravidians, are described by Professor Lynn Thorndike as short black men with almost Negro noses, and by Dr. Will Durant as a dark-skinned, broad-nosed people. The Aryan hymns of the Rig Veda, dated about 1,000 years before Christ, recall the people the invaders found as black-skinned barbarians, the Dasas or slaves. Yet Aryan pride of race, Jackson notes, was shaken by archaeology. Sir John Marshall and Dr. Ernest Mackay uncovered in the Valley of the Indus a complex civilization equal to, and in some respects superior to, those of early Mesopotamia and Egypt, the work of those very black men the Aryans had despised, flourishing more than 5,000 years ago. These Asiatic black men, Jackson continues, were not confined to the mainland. On the authority of Sir Harry Johnston, he traces the Asiatic Negro spreading, by land connections now vanished, through eastern Australia to Tasmania, and from the Solomon Islands to New Caledonia, New Zealand, Fiji, and even Hawaii. The Negroid element still detectable in Burma and Annam, Johnston argued, is easily explained by supposing that in ancient times, southern Asia held a Negro population stretching from the Persian Gulf to Indochina and the Malay archipelago. A great belt of dark-skinned humanity in this reconstruction once girdled the southern rim of the Old World, the very same Indian Ocean division of mankind that Boas had drawn on his two-race map. The black race, in Jackson's reconstruction, was never a local people, but a global one, the oldest layer of humanity spread across 3 continents. Even Europe, Jackson argues, has a buried African chapter. The Celts, ancient inhabitants of Britain and the masters of the Druid priesthood, are usually called Caucasoids, but Sir Godfrey Higgins, after much study, concluded they were a Negroid people. In his Anacalypsis, Higgins wrote that a great nation called the Celtae, whose priests were the Druids, had spread themselves almost over the whole earth, leaving their rude, gigantic monuments from India to the extremity of Britain. These Celts, he held, were the early individuals of a black nation. The learned Morris agreed that the Cushites had built the great temples of India and Britain alike. And the mathematician Reuben Burrow had no hesitation in pronouncing Stonehenge itself a temple of the black, curly-headed Buddha. Then Jackson crosses the Atlantic. Columbus, he insists, came late. Professor Leo Wiener of Harvard had written a 3-volume work, Africa and the Discovery of America, arguing that the New World was reached by Africans long before Columbus. Wiener's evidence was concrete: African words embedded in American Indian languages, vases and pipe bowls from the ruins of the mound builders carved with Negro faces, African food plants such as the peanut and the yam growing in America, and a totemic clan organization closely resembling African totemism. His colleagues sneered, Professor Spindon mocking Wiener for swarming his Negroes across the Atlantic in 50 voyages before Columbus. But Jackson treats the sneer as evasion, not refutation, and the evidence as well worth weighing on its merits. American civilization, Jackson argues, is far older than the textbooks allow. The anthropologist Alice Hrdlicka held that the Indians came from Asia across the Bering Strait only 10,000 years ago, but the ruins predate that arrival. The German astronomer Rudolf Müller judged Tiahuanaco in Bolivia to be between 10 and 14,000 years old. In Mexico, Maximus Neumayer estimated the monument of Cuicuilco at 13,000 years and thought the pyramids of Teotihuacan, some 4,500 years old, were built by a people akin to the Egyptians and arranged as a model of the solar system. Ramon Mena dated the great city of Palenque at over 10,000 years. The makers of these cities, Jackson notes, vanished long before the Indian ever arrived. And some of those early Americans, Jackson argues, were themselves black. The French archaeologist Désiré Charnay unearthed statues near Mexico City with unmistakably Negroid features and concluded the Americans were a mixed race of both Asiatic and African ancestry. Father Roman, among the first missionaries to reach the New World, recorded a tribe of black men who came from the south and landed in Haiti, armed with darts of guanin and known as the Black Guaninis. The historian Deroux cataloged many such peoples: the Charuas of Brazil, the Black Caribs of St. Vincent, the Jamasi of Florida, and the dark men whom Balboa met crossing the Isthmus of Darien in the year 1513. Short noted, too, the striking similarity between certain American and West African languages. Black nations, Jackson concludes, lived in America long before the Europeans ever came. Jackson's final movement gathers the threads: a sunken continent, a Mayan queen, and the black gods worshipped across the whole ancient world. The strangest link of all, Jackson offers, ties the Maya of Yucatan to the Nile. The archaeologist Augustus Laplongeon claimed to have deciphered inscriptions in Prince Ko's palace at Chichen Itza, telling a tale some 11,000 years old. Two princes, Ko and Iok, sought the hand of Queen Mu. Ko won her, and the jealous Iok stabbed his brother through the heart. Rather than wed her husband's killer, the queen fled toward Atlantis, but learning it had sunk beneath the sea, she sailed instead to Egypt, where she was hailed as queen and raised the Sphinx as a memorial to her murdered husband. It sounds like a fable, Jackson allows, yet if the Sphinx with its Ethiopian face is a Mayan monument, then the Mayas were of African origin. Atlantis itself, Jackson argues, belongs to the Ethiopian story. The philosopher Proclus claimed he could prove that Atlantis had once existed, citing as his authority the Ethiopian history of Marcellus, which Jackson notes plainly implies that Atlantis was a part of Ethiopia. Students have placed the lost land in many spots: Count de Prorock beneath the Sahara, Kirchmeier in South Africa, and the great Leo Frobonius in West Africa, specifically in Nigeria, whose ancient civilization he linked to the Etruscans and the Assyrians. In Yorubaland, between the Niger and the sea, Frobonius found ruined palaces and exquisite statuary, and heard legends of a royal city with walls of gold that had long ago sunk beneath the waves. The new age after Atlantis, wrote Eugene George, was ruled by the black race. Jackson closes with comparative religion, which, being conservative, preserves what else is lost. The Greek sage Xenophanes observed a profound truth. Every people paints its gods to resemble itself, the Ethiopian making his gods black and flat-nosed, the Thracian his red-haired and blue-eyed. So when the great nations of the world are found worshipping black gods, Jackson reasons, they either belonged to the black race or received their religion from it. The proofs, he says, are abundant. The ancient gods of India wear Ethiopian crowns. Moses first met Jehovah among the Midianites, an Ethiopian tribe. Zeus so cherished the Ethiopians that he banqueted with them twice a year. And Sir Godfrey Higgins testified that all the gods and goddesses of Greece, Jupiter, Bacchus, Apollo, Isis, and Ceres, were black. These black gods, Jackson observes, share a startling biography. Most were crucified saviors, nailed to a cross or bound to a tree with arms outstretched, slain to redeem mankind. Among them he names Osiris and Horus of Egypt, Krishna of India, Mithra of Persia, Quetzalcoatl of Mexico, Adonis of Babylon, and Attis of Phrygia. Nearly all of them, he writes, were born of a virgin on or near the 25th of December, their births heralded by a star, in a cave or a stable. All were slain, descended into hell, and rose again at the beginning of spring. The parallels with the gospel story, Jackson argues, are so close that progressive Bible scholars now admit these heathen messiahs were woven into the very life of Jesus. The signs of that common origin, Jackson argues, survive in the very churches of Europe. The Tau cross, thought by many Christians to be a unique emblem of their faith, is in fact of ancient Ethiopian origin. The Christian cross, one scholar wrote, is made in the exact image of the Ethiopian Tau. The earliest Madonnas, too, were black. The images of Isis and Horus, of Devaki and Krishna, and many of Mary and Jesus show a dark mother holding a white-draped infant with a black face. Verrill found Guatemalan Indians bowing to a black Christ in rites he judged of Mayan origin. From all of this, Jackson concludes, one inference follows, that all the civilized races had a common origin in a single older seat of culture. That older seat of culture, Jackson concludes, was the vast domain the ancients called Ethiopia. Samuel Lang reckoned that Egypt and Western Asia each reveal at the very dawn of record not rude beginnings, but a civilization already ancient and far advanced, populous cities, organized priesthoods, writing whose origin is lost in myth, and astronomy implying ages of patient observation. Such a height, Lang wrote, must have required an immense and immeasurable time to climb. Jackson kept his essay short, he tells us, for readers with little leisure for history. But its claim is immense, that the black peoples of the ancient world were not the latecomers of civilization, but its founders, and that the cradle of mankind's culture stood on the upper waters of the Nile.